So one of the videos we did like a week or two ago is we looked at a video from IGN that was actually very, very good. And funnily enough, it was it was a video posted by, I think, the best host that they have. It's this guy, Jim Trinkup. But you'll notice the logo on the bottom left is not IGN's logo. It's apparently because they are owned, like Eurogamer and IGN are owned by the same parent company. So IGN has started reposting Eurogamer videos, which they can do. And they ended up being like the highest rated videos that they've put out in a long time, which I find really funny that the best IGN videos are non-IGN videos. But having said that, this is a video that a bunch of you guys recommended we check out, posted over a week ago from IGN. And it apparently discusses why the comparisons to Red Dead and other similarly massive games can kind of end up being the thief of joy. You know, they say comparison is the thief of joy, and apparently this is making a similar case. Let's see what he has to say. Check it out. Take it away, Jim.
Let's consider the facts here. Red Dead Redemption 2 and Mafia: The Old Country, released 7 years apart, are both about a guy who rides horses in a hot country, which means they're exactly the same, and so it's perfectly reasonable to compare them like to like on how they handle inconsequential details like, does a fence break if you shoot it, or how much does water splash if you shoot it, or will a guy cradle his wound if you shoot him? Sure, we might be comparing billion-dollar apples to bulk discount Sicilian lemons here, but it does prove conclusively that Red Dead 2 was the last good video game made with real passion and not to further some sort of agenda. Oh, I can't even do this facetiously, but it seems as though the internet is obsessed with comparing Red Dead Redemption 2 to everything that comes out, from the latest Assassin's Creed to the new Mafia to even Death Stranding 2 of all things. But why? What is it about Red Dead 2 that makes it the bar to clear, even now, after the best part of a decade? And why does it seem like games and the technology they run on are getting less impressive as time goes on? Well, let's talk about that. And I'll tell you straight off the bat, it's got nothing to do with developers being lazy.
I will say at the outset, I'm excited to hear his case. I agree that it can often spoil the fun when you are constantly comparing everything to Red Dead or to GTA or to Cyberpunk or whatever. Games are made with different intentions and different priorities constantly. And all of game development is about concessions. It's about, we want to do this, but we can't do it all the way to that degree. So we'll do it to this degree and we'll make the most of it. It's always about making those exceptions and working with it. And it's important to remember also like the scope and scale, the budgets, the time, all of that. Red Dead compared to Mafia as an example, because I remember those comparisons, people being like, you could swim in Red Dead, you can't swim in Mafia, therefore Mafia is bad. And it's like they are fundamentally different things. Like these games are so far apart in what they're trying to do, in the resources they had available to them, the time they had available to them. Like comparing them is frankly ridiculous. It's just, they're not the same thing at all. And so I also cringe at a lot of the comparisons. And I think that it's also unfortunately just an artifact of modern social media, videos on TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, everywhere. Is that it's really easy, especially when people are looking for a reason to be upset about a game or something. It's really easy for them to attach to it an excuse or an explanation by saying this other thing looks better or is more impressive in this way, therefore it's okay to dislike it. We saw it a lot with a lot of games that came out in the last like year and a half that people may have disliked for political reasons. We even saw it with like KCD 2, where there were people saying, no, this game is bad because it's like too European or something. And so they're trying to find a reason to be upset about it. And they look at comparison videos where they see like the muscle deformation in KCD 2's horse muscle is not as good as Red Dead 2's horse deformation with their muscles when they walk. So clearly they're lazy. And so, you know, they just start to look for reasons to be upset, you know? It's cringy.
There is a good reason why certain types of outlets are fixated on the idea of Red Dead Redemption 2 as the gold standard that every subsequent game fails to live up to. on some level, because it's a hugely popular game from a beloved studio and the social media algorithms know that, but there's very little value in producing content about it unless you can tie it to a new release or some kind of fresh news story, because until there's a remaster or a sequel announced, there's not really anything to say about it that people don't already know. And as much as you don't gotta hand it to them under any circumstances, these content creators do actually have a point. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a stone cold classic and remains one of the most technically impressive game worlds ever realized. Its map is outrageously vast and diverse, with realistically populated urban, small town and rural environments of every kind. Its attention to detail in its world simulation and how the player can interfere with it is frankly staggering. We haven't seen anything quite like it before or since, apart from, other Rockstar games, of which it is considered the best, and for good reason. There's a cottage industry of gaming content out there that is obsessed with unfavourably comparing new releases to genre classics. If the internet flags you as a gamer, you probably have been fed a lot of these comparison videos that compare cherry-picked footage with the goal of demonstrating that new things are bad and old things are good. It's our generation.
And what's funny is that even happened back in 2018 or 2017 or whatever year you want to look at, where even back then there were comparison videos pointing out how the older game was better than the newer game, which is, I think, just a human thing to do. We always look back on the simpler times and how they were better. So I think it's very normal. Even, whether we look at, something like big franchises like Call of Duty, where we look back at the older games and like, oh, they're so much better than what we have now. Or we look at, other projects or other things like even single player games like the Mafia franchise, which he brought up. We look back at like Mafia 2. Oh, that was way better than Mafia 3. So it's far from a new phenomenon for sure. I think it's just exacerbated by the fact that those videos go super viral too.
It's equivalent of pining for racist sitcoms based on the war, or pining for the war. They're often short form as well, so they'll be less than a minute long and all the footage will be scaled down to a portrait frame, which is obviously bull. We're clearly not talking about a Digital Foundry level of analysis here. Yes, I'm allowed to mention them, and no, we're not enemies now. I can't believe Digital Foundry walked out on us. Red Dead 2's remarkably future-proof technology and the gorgeous art direction that give it its timeless look is a gift to people who make this sort of petty outrage farming content, because it's getting long in the tooth, and we are at a point where I think instinctively we would expect it to look its age by now. 7 years in terms of the video games industry, this massive ongoing autobahn collision between artistic expression and tech product. I mean, that's a lifetime. The amount of time between Red Dead Redemption 2 and Mafia the Old Country is the same amount of time as there was between the original Grand Theft Auto on PS1 and San Andreas on the PS2. And the difference between those games is mind-blowing. On that basis, you'd expect Mafia the Old Country to be almost as realistic as actually going to Sicily, as if Sicily needs any more lemons. But everyone watching this knows that's not the case, because we just don't have those massive generational leaps in technology anymore.
Well, and I think it's not always just about technology. Sometimes it's also about manpower, time, resources, and like, considering that the technological advancements have allowed them to make this game in a much shorter period of time and way cheaper, I will say, than like Red Dead 2 was. If you wanted to make Mafia the Old Country with the level of fidelity and interactivity and simulation and everything that you saw in Red Dead 2, it would be possible, but you would need 2,000 people that are all industry leading talents, and you need to give them like 5 to 6 years to work on the project, and you'd be spending like $1 billion doing it. And that is just frankly not something that makes sense for 99.9% of all companies out there. It just doesn't make sense to spend that much time and that much money on something like that when you can spend like 40 million, 50 million, put this game out and make more profit and take way less risk than spending $1 billion. At some point it just doesn't make sense. Like, you can make a lot more money for most companies. You can make a lot more money with low risk, smaller products than trying to swing for the fences with one gigantic project. Like, there are companies that have gone to bat trying to do the $200-300 million AAA games, hoping that they blow up. Because I know some people are going to be like, well, just do the AAA thing and then you'll make AAA money. Do you remember Forspoken? Remember that one? Do you remember Saints Row reboot? Does that ring a bell? They tried swinging for the fences. Now, they missed. They missed. Concord, yeah, they missed. They spend crazy amounts of money and it did not pay off for them. And that's where the risk comes in. Because it's easy to say, just make a Red Dead 2. Make the old country, but with Red Dead 2 levels of interactivity and complexity and simulation. It's easy to just say that. If it were easy, everybody would do it. Why wouldn't they? The reason not everybody does it is because it's incredibly difficult and stupid expensive. And you need world-class talent as a part of all of that, which you can't just get, by the way. Like, you can't just flip a switch and hire the world's best people. Like, you either have to pay them way more money, or they have to already be working for you, or they have to believe in what you're doing so much that it's going to be good for their resume. Just like everybody who's working on GTA 6 right now knows that being on your resume goes a long way. Goes a long way. You have GTA 6 on your resume as like a quest designer, you're going to be able to get a job anywhere in the world you want. Right? Whereas working on a Mafia project, maybe if it ends up blowing up, sure, but it could also turn into a Forspoken, in which case nobody wants to touch you once you've worked on a flop, you know? So the point is, people act like the reason you don't get more Red Deads is because of laziness, and that's just not the case. For most companies, 99.9% of companies, it just doesn't make sense to try and do that. It makes way more sense to do something smaller and more focused with tighter scope that you can rely on being successful with a smaller budget. It makes way more sense to do that than to try and swing for the home run and potentially end up like a Forspoken or a Concord. It just doesn't make sense to take that risk, you know? And I think it's good because, like, I don't want more flops. I want more games that I can enjoy. I really enjoyed Mafia the Old Country. I did rant and rave. Rave is maybe the wrong word. I did rant and vent a lot about the ending of Mafia the Old Country. If you want to hear that, I put together a big, like, 2-3 hour critique of the game. So you can go check that out if you're interested on the main channel. But anyway.
But why? Well, Moore's Law is not the law. The fact that 7 years have passed since Red Dead 2 means absolutely nothing. It's a pithy and effective thing to point out if you want to convince people that video games are crap now, for reasons. But the passage of time doesn't guarantee whatever a YouTuber's narrow definition of progress is. I'm not a YouTuber, I'm a member of the specialist press. When I started high school, there was no such thing as an MP3 player. It did not exist as a concept. And by the time I'd left high school, everyone had an iPod. And that's only like 4 years because I'm a thicko, right? So in that short amount of time, we went from the concept basically not existing to it reaching its zenith. The portable digital music player with capacity measured in gigabytes and an intuitive interface that your granny could use. Now, since all the things we used to carry around with us have been superseded by everyone carrying around a portable supercomputer that is your iPod, your phone, your telly.
Dude, the fact that he has like, I thought I couldn't like this guy anymore. It's just he's fantastic.
Your life.
But he is right that, like, at some point the diminishing marginal returns reach a point where it's just not going to feel like that big of a leap anymore. It's like, as you know, if we go back to the 1980s, so we'll just say that this is like 1980, okay? The industry and the tech advancement has kind of been like this. And so, you know, maybe this is launch of the PS1, and then you get PS2, PS3, PS4, PS5, and then PS6 will be here. It'll be a step up, but probably not that big of a leap compared to what you're expecting, right? And that's why I think they'll also, frankly, I think they're going to come up with a reason to delay the next gen. I think that probably happens. I think it probably doesn't happen now till like 2020, late 28 to possibly 29. I think that it's going to be delayed, especially with the RAM stuff going on. But I think that this is just what's happening, and it's happening with game fidelity as well. And I think a lot of people are hoping for that, like, PS3 to PS4 leap in graphical fidelity. They didn't really get it with the leap from PS4 to PS5, and they're still hoping for some big leap, and I just don't think we're really going to see it. I think where the advancements will come is with like NPC AI, with scope and scale, and hopefully with optimization, but I guess time will tell. YouTube Nathan, thank you for the $10. Very generous. Thank you. Hey Luke, big fan. What's your opinion on the newer Pokemon games, and how would you recommend Nintendo win the fans back with next gen games? I think this is the non-Nintendo fanboy take. I think the recent Pokemon games look like ass. Sorry, not sorry. Just my opinion. Cancel me. I don't care. I understand some people really like them. I think they look like ass. And so I've had zero interest in them. My wife, she played the recent, I forget which one. She played one of the recent Pokemon games and had a fine time. It was super broken for her though. So I don't think she was even able to finish it. It got so broken at one point. Maybe they fixed it now, but she had to give it up at least for a while. So I don't know. I have very little interest, but what I did have interest in, and did have interest in that I didn't expect to have interest in, was Pal World. So to me, it seems like if they want to win people like me over, they should give the rights of the IP to other studios that are more capable. It seems whoever's doing the Nintendo or the Pokemon stuff right now, what they think is good enough is far from good enough for people like me. So if they want to win people like me over, at least they need to bring in some fresh ideas, because it's not working. And I think that if they license the IP out to other studios, like if they gave, the IP to Pocket Pair, I think that'd be baller. I think that'd be awesome. But anyway, let's continue.
Library, your local branch of Tesco, a Spirit Level, and your mum. It's fair to say the rate of change in electronics is a bit more sedate than it used to be. I don't know about you, but the phone I have now more or less does the same my iPhone 4 did 15 years ago. And it does it in the exact same way. In fact, if you went back and showed this to a person in 2010, they'd know exactly what it was. They'd instinctively know how to use it. And if anything, they'd probably wonder how you can manage with something that's so big. I mean, to someone rocking an iPhone 4, that's like a broadsheet. If you went back to the time of Diocletian and showed a Roman irrigation engineer one of these, they'd probably ask you not to wave a piece of obsidian at them while they were trying to drain a lake with an Archimedes screw. The exact same Archimedes screw his ancient Greek counterpart was using hundreds of years earlier. Like hundreds of years earlier. Now what the f am I talking about? Well, I'm just trying to illustrate that the rate of technological advancement is not and has never been constant. Progress is not guaranteed in tech or science or medicine or anything. We've just come to expect it because we happen to have lived through a time of accelerated change. And I think our brains have also been cooked by concepts like Moore's Law. If you haven't heard of Moore's Law, it's often expressed or understood as roughly a doubling of computing power every 2 years. What Gordon Moore was actually doing was observing that the number of transistors that Intel could cram into a single chip was doubling at a consistent rate, and extrapolating that to predict where the technology would be a decade down the line. But Gordon Moore was speaking in his capacity as a businessman as much as he was speaking as an engineer. And the thing about businesses is that they like stable, predictable growth. In a nutshell, Intel likes knowing when and how it's going to sell its new chips. And although every chip manufacturer since has tried to keep Moore's Law going, because their businesses all operate on the assumption that it will hold like forever, it is no longer a sure thing. In fact, a lot of businesses have decided that it's already over, and that's rapidly becoming the consensus. And that's also one of the reasons.
Well, it's also not just about, I think it's also how the technological advancement is applied, right? So we can have more powerful computing hardware, which we objectively do, but it's how it's used that matters. And I think in the leap from like the PS2 to 360 era, we had huge leaps in the available memory, which allowed for much bigger worlds and open worlds and larger zones for you to explore. And then the jump to the PS4 era, there was much more memory, and we also had higher levels of VRAM available, so you got better textures and all sorts of stuff. And I think all of that contributed to what were tangible leaps. With the PS5 era, the leap has been much more towards a player demand of 60 frames from 30. Back with the PS4 era, 30 was the standard. Like, that was the standard. I think with the push to 60, that's led a lot of studios to try and hit those targets with like a performance mode that suffers graphically, or at least in terms of fidelity, whether it's by lowering the resolution or it's by doing really aggressive upscaling like we saw with Star Wars Jedi Survivor, which the whole screen looked like it was smeared with a Krispy Kreme donut. I mean, it just was like blurry as hell. So when we talk about the AAA space with the PS4 era being okay and tolerant of like 30 frames, nowadays that's seen as like, if your game launches just at 30, it's like, really? And so the standard, or a lot of the extra power has been pushed into that. And to be clear, I'm okay with that because I like having higher frame rates, but I think that's also part of the reason that you haven't seen a lot of crazy pushes elsewhere. And they also, let's be real, this generation has been completely focused on ray tracing. That's where a lot of the effort is going, a lot of the extra compute power is going. And I think most people don't feel like it's worth it, but maybe one day it is. Some games it definitely is tangible. You can see a big difference when it's ray traced versus not, but the performance drops as a result are rough.
By the way, that the old paradigm of games consoles getting cheaper after they've been out for a few years, you can forget about that as well. Miniaturization is reaching a hard limit. So this assumption we all have as a society that technology just gets better somehow doesn't hold up anymore. And this phenomenon that's...
I will offer some potentially reassuring, well, I'll offer this. I think part of the reason so many console manufacturers have refused to lower prices and have even risen prices is partially because of things like tariffs and manufacturing costs, because of RAM shortages, stuff like that. A lot of it's also greed, as he suggested. But when I say greed, I mean the company is pushing harder on the price line than they would typically or would have last gen or years ago, because they feel like they can get away with it. And for the last handful of years, that's been the case, is that like as gamers have been more skeptical of releases, they're buying less AAA games, but they're still engaging with hardware. They're still buying hardware, upgrading, and doing that type of thing. That's changing starting this past quarter. I mean, the last couple of quarters, it's been kind of rough for video game spending. But I think for 2026 especially, it'll be really rough. I think people are going to be very careful with their money, not just because of broader economic factors, but also just everything is raising in price. So they're going to stop buying. And that's going to force all of these companies to start trimming margins to get some volume coming back. Because it's easy to have 30% margins when people are buying your product. When everybody says, screw that, we're not buying it at that price, then maybe you drop to like a 10% margin or a 5% margin because you just need money to flow in. And that, I think, is what's going to happen with the console space, probably not to like 2027 or 2028. But I think that you're going to see video game spending, especially on hardware, take a nosedive this year. And that's going to force the companies to start trying to get much more competitive in order to win your dollar and win your engagement on their platforms, which I think long term will be good. Short term, it's going to be ass and super annoying because everything's going to be so expensive. But long term, I think it'll be okay.
Kind of broken gaming, where games from 10 or more years ago are still holding their own against new releases that have all the current tools available to them, is evidence of that. One of the firms that has declared Moore's Law dead and buried is Nvidia, which, not being shy of putting its money where its CEO's mouth is, has been spending its vast R&D budget, thank you crypto bros, on coming up with ways to continue improving what their products are capable of in smarter and more targeted ways than simply increasing their raw power. Technologies like DLSS and ray reconstruction, for example, are designed to make extremely marketable features like ray tracing, 4K, triple-digit frame rates achievable on silicon, which just doesn't have the raw numbers to do that sort of thing without cheating somehow. And the upshot is that noticeably better results are achieved with only modest increases in raw power. The goal is to do more with less, or to do a lot more with only a little more. Work smarter.
And you can train those super sampling models on supercomputers that are building out your same data center infrastructure that you can then use to go to investors and claim all of these advancements with your AI initiatives. So it makes investors happy, It lets you still pretend like things are getting way, way better regularly, even though it's just like software updates basically for DLSS, and things like that. On average, I've noticed a decrease in performance in AAA games, particularly due to AI upscaling, which demotivates the devs to optimize their games. Hopefully, we see a shift towards true optimization. Well, ultimately, Composed, thank you for the 10. It's a managerial issue if they decide to launch in January versus in May, right? I'm sure the devs are always asking for more time. It's the management and the producers that decide when it goes up. If the managers and producers think that the upscaling stuff is good enough or will get the game to good enough, they'll do that. They'll push it out and be like, okay, well, I can't tell a difference between super blurry and super sharp. So yeah, call it. It's good. Ship it, which I think has happened with plenty of games. But if the devs have the time and the resources and they prioritize it and they are rewarded for doing so, then you'll see plenty of studios taking their time to optimize. Like plenty of people meme on AC Shadows. The game was pretty damn well optimized. Tell you what, even after the delay, they were able to add Steam Deck support. Virtually unheard of that a game gets delayed and they make so many optimizations that they're able to add Steam Deck support when they initially thought they weren't going to support it. That's awesome. That deserves credit. You don't have to like AC Shadows, but that is a good Ubisoft. Pat them on the head. Same with like KCD2. That game, they took their time. They optimized the crap out of it, which was a common point of feedback from the first game, was that it didn't run very well. And they made probably one of the most impressive optimized games of 2025. Ran fantastically well. And all of the freaking text sheet stuff that they put out where it's like, these are the recommended specs, none of them included upscalers in those stat sheets. It was like, no, that's for extra frames. We're not hitting targets based on those. Don't be stupid. Like, it was awesome. Very refreshing. Veilguard 2, yeah. Veilguard, to their credit, they optimized the crap out of that game. There were other problems with that game, certainly, that you couldn't optimize, but that one also deserves credit for being optimized. So I think that they really, like, the key is reward studios and games that take their time and polish, and punish the studios and publishers that are rushing stuff out. People punished Ubisoft for rushing Star Wars Outlaws out the door when it wasn't ready by not buying it. And you know what? Ubisoft responded by fixing it eventually, and then also by delaying all of their other stuff so that they didn't run into the same problem with AC Shadows, with Hexe, and everything else. And that's the point. But I think the key is when there's other games that come out and they're not ready for prime time, don't buy them or return them or whatever, to send the message that you're not going to tolerate it. That's the key. Continuing.
Not harder, all that. Which brings me to the last point. You are not Unreal 5's customer. The difference between Red Dead 2 and Mafia: The Old Country isn't just the span of time between them, it's the sheer scale and scope of the projects. Now, we know a lot less about Mafia's development story than we do about Red Dead 2's, by virtue of the fact that Mafia's only just come out, but we know enough to make a few educated guesses about the resources available to it. Mafia: The Old Country's developer, Hangar 13, took charge of the Mafia series in the mid-2010s, which led to its first release, the much maligned but honestly not that bad Mafia 3. Now, it's interesting that Mafia 3 is probably the closest equivalent to Red Dead 2 in Hangar 13's entire back catalogue. It's a proper open world with all the side content and icon janitoring that implies, and just like Red Dead 2, it runs on a proprietary engine. Now, this was back when Hangar 13 was a bit bigger and had the resources to maintain its own game engine, and without getting too much into it, because hell, this is already dragging on, since those halcyon days, Hangar 13 has properly been through the ringer. We're talking huge, expensive projects getting cancelled, multiple layoffs. One of its 4 studios lost 2/3 of its people in one go at one point. The Hangar 13 that made Mafia: The Old Country is a much skinnier beast than the well-resourced one that made Mafia 3 all those years ago. And that's why, instead of a full-fat Mafia 4, we've had a remake of the first game, a linear mission-based experience, and The Old Country, which was marketed as a return to the series' roots, i.e. a much smaller, more focused experience. Not because of any artistic restraint, you understand, because it's cheaper to do that. Before you start typing, doing...
And it seems to have worked. It seems to have worked. I tweeted out the reveal. Let me see if I can find it. It was one. I tweeted it out. It's because they revealed that Mafia apparently like turned a profit. I think it was. Was this it? Yeah. Mafia, the old country, beat internal expectations, proves there's a market for narrative games done well, says Take-Two CEO Strauss Zelnick. And this was in a broader discussion about a bunch of other stuff. But let's see. Yeah, they were kind of underwhelmed, I think, by Borderlands 4. But other big game of the quarter for Take-Two Interactive was Mafia, the old country, which beat the firm's internal expectations. And Zelnick says proves there's a market for narrative games done well. What we suspected was confirmed, which is just if you give consumers a great narrative experience that's a lot of fun, somewhat contained, and at a fair price, then you have the perfect result, which was great. And I agree. But there were people saying that the game was bad because you couldn't swim. Like if those people that are doing that, you know, that are saying these games are bad because they're not as good as Red Dead in these various regards, if they had their way, then like literally the only companies putting anything together would be the big AAA companies that can afford to swing for the fences with big budgets, but you end up with largely generic experiences that are meant to appeal to the mass market. If you want smaller, tighter experiences, you need to reward them when they come out. And the key is that they're unique and they're well done, and that they also are priced appropriately. Like I think if you price a game like, you know, Mafia, the old country at the same level as GTA 6, expectations will naturally be there, but they didn't do that. They priced it lower to set the expectation that this is a smaller experience, and I think that helps along.
Before you start typing down there that Mafia 3 isn't as good as Red Dead either, what you talking about, Jim? Well, yeah, it's not, but even in their heyday, Hangar 13 was nowhere near as big or as rich as Rockstar. They never had the money to have one guy spend 6 months on making horse balls react realistically to wind chill. Only Rockstar can do that because they have more money than the mob or God. Rockstar has the resources to build a hyper-realistic, reactive world the player has a convincing presence in.
Well, and you got to remember, this is again why I've said watch out for these Chinese studios, dude. Because what is one thing that allowed them to build Red Dead the way that they did? That GTA money. The GTA Online money lets you do so many things that you just don't get to do otherwise, man. Because you just have an endless credit card. Like you just unlimited. Crunch as well. They also have Crunch. But like some of the Crimson Desert stuff, yeah, like this. Hold on. This was recorded on a potato.
Crimson Desert has been talked about for years.
Joystick Insider. There's a joke there about putting a joystick inside of, you know what? It's not important. This game, I'm sorry to just mute. I'm just trying to look at a visual representation. I'm sure this is a great channel. I was like, I gotta see this. But like with this, people are like, how on earth is this possible? How is this possible? And it's because they have Black Desert Online money. They got that MMO money, and that allows them to lay, you know, and rely on that money to fund everything they're doing. Because even if Crimson Desert goes belly up for some reason, the company will still be okay because they got MMO money, baby. And that's true of a lot of these companies, like Blood Message. You know, this one, Blood Message, looks absolutely insane. This game is coming from a NetEase studio, a big Chinese development house. They built this out with NetEase money, and NetEase, historically, they've got a crap ton of resources and money flowing in from all sorts of live service games that they've built out in China, in Japan, all over the place. They're a huge company that has tons of money flowing in from those live service efforts. And that allows them to pour money into this with way less risk to the overall health of the company. That's one thing that Ubisoft used to have when they were more reliable with their releases. They haven't really been hitting it consistently out of the park like they used to. I mean, it used to be that Ubisoft was just pumping out AAA bangers pretty regularly like 10, 15 years ago. It's been a while, but now you're going to see it from a lot of these Eastern devs too. So I think that having that sweet live service money definitely helps bankroll big, very risky operations like a billion or $500 million, open world game.
One of the most expensive games of all time with a budget in the hundreds of millions. An estimated 1,600 developers worked on it across all disciplines. Now, if everyone at Hangar 13 worked on Mafia the Old Country, including like receptionists and accountants and all that, and that's quite an assumption, its development team is less than 300 people. So that's less than a fifth of the team it took to make Red Dead 2. On a much longer turnaround, by the way. So look, even accepting...
If you break it down in man hours, dude, it's not even close. Like the amount of people multiplied by the amount of time, like it's a fraction of a fraction that made Mafia versus Red Dead 2. Like it's just not even close. But it's because they were trying to do different things.
The dubious idea that Mafia the Old Country doesn't look any more graphically advanced than Red Dead 2. The question...
But that's why I agree with him. It doesn't look like significantly like a huge leap forward over Red Dead 2 graphically, despite being 7 years apart. But even that is pretty remarkable when you consider that now you're able to achieve this level of fidelity with a way smaller team way faster. Like that's where the leap was made. That's where the leap was made. It's just that's not as exciting for the player because we don't see the dev process. We don't see it taking, 2 or 3 years versus 6 or 7. All we see is the end product, but that's why I think that pricing is so crucial. Like, I think that you really, really have to price it appropriately because if it took you less time and it's a smaller budget, if you price it at $50 instead of 70, that goes a long way. Sorry, I said 6, 7 again. God damn it.
Shouldn't be, how come this 7-year-old game beats this brand new one in direct comparison? The question should be, how the did Hangar 13 get anywhere close to Red Dead 2 with the resources it had? And if it wasn't close, those guys wouldn't be comparing it. And yeah, part of the answer is that they didn't spend any time on inconsequential like fences breaking realistically when you shoot them, or horse balls, or can't really think of anything else apart from horse balls. Now I'm kind of fixated on that. But the other part of the answer is that
Well, and that stuff does nothing but satisfy like the people who are making those comparison videos. And frankly, I think the average person just doesn't really care that much if you shoot the fence and it snaps in half versus if you shoot the fence and it has just the little bullet hole on it. I don't think people care that much. It's certainly cool, but that's probably like, oh, cool. I don't think the average person is like, I was gonna buy the game, but the fences don't break. I don't think anybody said that at all. I think what they were probably doing is when they are looking for a reason or they don't like the game for one reason or another, and then that offers a sort of affirmation of what they had already decided, which is it's a human thing to do, but it's I don't think indicative of quality, certainly.
13, like lots of other studios, including CD Projekt Red, has switched entirely over to Unreal 5, which is not for your benefit or mine, frankly. It doesn't really matter to the end user which brush is being used to paint the picture, after all. All game engines have their pros and cons. I don't understand them because I'm not a game dev. And while a lot of Unreal Engine's marketing is aimed at punters like me and you, so its splash screen is mentally associated with good graphics and is therefore a mark of quality, most of the recent marketing isn't so much about how great the games look. They're more about how much work the developer had to do to get there.
Yeah, it's all about efficiency. Absolutely. Walter, thank you for the 10. Imagine being the unfortunate Rockstar dev that had to work on immersive horse balls. I think Sam Hauser talked about that and he's like, I didn't know that was in there, but it's probably not. I think Sam said he didn't think, or Dan. I think it's Dan Hauser, right? I don't know. I think Sam and Dan, are they brothers? I don't know. It's a blur. Anyway, one of the Hauser brothers, he did that interview with Lex Friedman and he was talking about the horseball thing. And he was like, I don't think it would take necessarily that long to do. Because you basically go into the horse agent within the engine and then you add that as a thing that gets checked in the code once every 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Are you in this area? Check the temperature of the environment. If it's at this temperature, shrink it by this amount, like do that. So probably relatively straightforward, but it's kind of a fun idea. Fun idea to just, a guy was sitting at lunch and like maybe he came into the office one day. It's really cold out. And then he's like, what am I going to do today? What am I going to do? My God, I've got it. I'm going viral. You know, probably didn't even tell his boss about it. Just took care of it. Did it. Just like, we'll see if anybody notices.
If you look at Unreal's procedural time-saving technologies like Nanite, Lumen, or MetaHuman, the big innovations here are in automating or making obsolete the kind of busy work that developers used to have to do, such as producing level of detail assets, or pre-baking light maps, or pressing F5 to make it good. I don't no, I'm not a game dev. The upshot of all this is that the ancient, decrepit Red Dead 2 being able to hold a candle to Mafia the Old Country at all doesn't represent any kind of regression. It demonstrates that the art and technical direction of one of the most expensive games of all time was built to last. I should think so, frankly. It demonstrates that technologies like Unreal Engine 5 and others have democratized the kind of fidelity that 7 years ago could only be achieved with bespoke technology and a bigger wage bill than Real Madrid, and that the economic feasibility of AAA game development is undergoing a massive rethink because it's just not as sustainable as it was in its 2018 form unless the end product is guaranteed to make $1 billion. Far from
True. It's just changed. But I think that absolutely what he's pointing out, like with the democratization of that level of fidelity, it's something we've grown used to. But you know, the little touches and the attention to detail, that is something that you can't just like have a better engine to achieve. That's something that either like you need more people or more time, or both, realistically both. And it's something that they're able to do with Red Dead 2 with the budgets and timescales they have. Doesn't make sense for like a smaller team of 100 people that's trying to put together a 2 or a AA kind of game. You know, it's just not where their focus is. And I think that's good. I think that's okay. We need more AA games, frankly, than we need more attempts at big AAA games. Personally, just my opinion. Cancel me. I don't care.
being a regression, it is technological progress. It's just not the kind that brings your wee brother closer to his ideal of ultimate photorealism, where you push the bayonet slowly into somebody's throat and then have to go to therapy.
Well, I think that this is also one of the other things that happens with Red Dead. You know how like on a scatter plot, you can have the all of the little points of, I don't know if this would be like quality, if we say like the vertical is quality, but you got all these random little plots, and it's like over time, you know, it's kind of like this with quality and budgets and all of this. And maybe some of them have massive budgets, if this is like the budget scale, but you know, terrible quality. Some of them are right in the middle. But then you have like Red Dead 2, which is just like all the way up at the top. It is clearly the outlier, but everybody is pointing to the outlier to try and make a rule for the data set, which is not how that works. The general rule of the data set is either you take in the average or look at the broader group to come up with what should be expected. Red Dead 2 is the outlier, but everybody tends to try and point to it as the rule. And so it's much less like when we look at Red Dead 2 and games like GTA 6, and we find them so remarkable, it's less of a bad mouthing for the whole industry and more of a testament to how remarkable Rockstar is. You know, it's less about putting down everybody else and more about praising Rockstar for being so fantastic, you know? Is that a Banksy?
Mafia the Old Country is a bit of an experiment. Can a studio make rent by knocking out these smaller games? Focused experiences that have
Oh my God, did you see what was on his computer, on his monitor?
Studio make rent by knocking out these smaller...
Did you see? I need one of those, dude. That's awesome. That's awesome. I love that. I need one of those. That's great.
Focused experiences that have AAA production values, but without the AAA statistics and, crucially, without the AAA price point. Is there an audience for that, or do too many people habitually believe they're being shortchanged unless they're literally playing a Rockstar game? Only time will tell, but I'll leave you with this. I'm very suspicious of a lot of these outlets that obsessively compare Red Dead 2 or whatever to newer games, because it's always pretty clear that the point isn't to compare and contrast the differences between old games and modern ones in a sort of academic way, but to deliberately feed the notion that in recent years gaming has fallen off, that there's no passion in the industry anymore, that all the talent is left and been replaced with political activists because their engagement depends on the impotent anger and malaise that characterizes the information dystopia era that we currently live in. The sense that everything was better before. Before what? Before when? Well, you know, I just want to go back. Back where? Back when? Well, you know, when I had light in my eyes and I still had my whole life ahead of me and I could go out with my mates whenever I wanted and I didn't have responsibilities and debt and life wasn't an endless meander from one disappointment to the next. I could still see my Taja. And Red Dead 2 had just come out. Oh, I was only asking.
I think it's also, and the reason why like we should kind of buck the trend and the feeling is because if you start to look at everything as though everything sucks and the industry's terrible and your favorite hobby is dying and all this, you will start to see it everywhere and everything will just be a confirmation of it. And how all social media works right now is whatever you are looking into and watching, you'll be fed more of it. So then you'll just go into this spiral of everything sucks, everything's bad, you shouldn't be excited, you shouldn't be interested, everything's awful, and it just spins and spins and spins. Like, it's why I make these videos saying, no, I think it's probably never been a better time to be a gamer. Maybe with how much RAM prices are going up, I'll say last year. You know, maybe last year there was never a better time to be a gamer. This year might be rough, but you know, I think that the industry is like bigger than it's ever been. There's more talent involved with it. The tools are more accessible to anybody. Game of the Year last year was a first-time title from a brand new studio using a publicly available game engine that you can use and download right now. That's crazy. That's crazy. It's a very good time. Are there going to be flops? Sure. Are there going to be disasters that we're going to talk about? You betcha. But let's not lose the forest for the trees, you know? Let's bear in mind that with some broader perspective, things are very, very good. Things are very, very good. Try to look at things with a little more optimism, a little more brightness, and I think you'll end up having a much better time. Because for every game that maybe some people might look at like a Mafia, the old country, and be disappointed that it's not like Mafia 3, the other way to look at it is that we got a new unique Mafia story in a tighter package from a studio that at most other companies would have been canceled and the studio would have been shut down years ago. You know, I don't like positivity. I have to reset my algo now. Exactly. Yeah. Oh. And I think that there's a balancing act to be had. I've said it. Yeah, we meme on stuff. We make fun of stuff. And when something is bad, we'll call it out as bad. But I think sometimes people, I guess, mix that up with therefore everything's terrible or everything sucks. I'm like, no, this thing sucks, but all this is great. You know, I want to be clear. The reason this one feels like it sucks so bad is because how good this stuff is. You know, it's just a slightly different way of framing it. The AAA devs are disconnected. A lot of them don't play games or know what they're doing. Of course, I can't speak for every AAA dev. I don't think you can either, or anybody can. What I will say is, of the people that I've spoken to, that is not true. Of the people I've spoken to that have worked on like some of the big stuff, like the people I met working at Bungie, a lot of them were obsessed with Tarkov. Shocker, they're making an extraction shooter. You know, a lot of the people at like Ubisoft that I've met and talked to, they were super into like hardcore RPGs or other games. Maybe with some case, like there's the memes of the Call of Duty devs where, what was it? Was it a cat cafe? Hold on. I think it was a cat cafe meme, wasn't it?
One of my favorite things in the map is the cat cafe. There's a karaoke bar, which is a lot of fun. Those is call outs where it's like, I got him in the cat cafe. That's gonna be one of my...
Like, that is stupid. That is very stupid to be like, what's your favorite part of this Call of Duty thing? The cat cafe. Like, you should know that you're gonna get flamed for that, okay? Like, that is stupid. So I'm sure there are people out there working in AAA game development that are not really gamers and are there for the cat cafes. But I think that the vast majority of devs are passionate gamers that want to make the best game they can. You know, does that mean they'll make the game you want? Not necessarily, but I think it's a bad idea to just dismiss them writ large because that's easy, you know.
He took my thing.